Well, Robbie, you were born in Scotland, but I believe migrated to Australia at the age of 8. Do you have any memories of Scotland, or?
Not as a kid. No, I always knew it was cold and all that sort of stuff. But my memory was I went back at 15, and believe it or not, just to visit the family and all that. And I started training with St Mirren, and Alex Ferguson was a manager. So that was my memories at 15. But my dad wouldn't let me stay. You know, it broke my heart, and because I was going to be offered schoolboys, I think they called them in those days. But no, Dad wouldn't let me stay. But when I played Scotland many years ago, Alex Ferguson came up and he said to me, "Are you the kid I tried to sign from Australia years ago?" I couldn't believe he still remembered. So
there you go. Well, I mean, that must have been a result of you getting in the state under-14s when you were at Kwinana United, because I believe that was really when you made a mark here in Western Australia.
Well, yeah, I don't know what you call making a mark. Yeah, I got in most of the state teams, got in the under-13s and to go to Orange, and broke my leg before we went. So they took me along as a guest, but I never played. But at 15, I got in the Kwinana senior team, so that's what I remember of sort of breaking into the first team and the seniors and all that sort of stuff.
And then from Kwinana you moved to Rockingham City, I mean, and that was where I believe you started playing as a centre-half.
Correct, yeah. Big Steve Stacey, who was a centre-half and a very good player. I was 6'3", gangly, whatever, you know, grown up, overnight sort of thing, height-wise. And Steve said, "We need a centre-half. You can go play centre-half." And believe it or not, it was against a team called North Perth Croatia, Dave Harrison, and then he signed me the next year. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then the move came to go to Adelaide and play in the NSL in 1980. Mm. I mean, in fact, you went in the South Australian Premier League first, didn't you? Yeah. Adelaide Azzurri.
Yeah, Frank Schaefer, once again, took me over there because he was the one that put me in the first team at Kwinana at 15. So he phoned me up and took me over there, and I had 1 year there and then got signed straight away by West Adelaide, Hellers. And yeah, that started my NSL. It was fantastic.
I mean, how tough was that? Because you were only 17 when you went to play in the South Australian Premier League, so still very young, moving into state, and then being signed obviously in the NSL again as quite a young player.
Yeah, look, no one knew me from Perth. I mean, Perth in those days, I think we had blokes like Gary Marocchi and Dave Jones had moved, but that was about it. No one else sort of knew about Perth, so me going over there as not being signed by an NSL club just to go state league, yeah, it was tough, but getting in, I like to think I made my mark pretty early and showed people I could do all right, you know.
Well, you made your debut on the opening day of the 82 season against Brisbane Lions, and you never really looked back from there. No. Did you feel you belonged?
Yeah, I loved it. I remember getting told by Frank Harrock many years later. He said, I seemed to be one of those players that whatever level they went to could fit in quite easily. So it's sort of, when I went to the NSL, I think the first year, I got one of my first fairest and best in the NSL and Players Player of the Year in the national tournament. So it sort of seemed to come easy, yeah.
And then you moved to Melbourne to Preston, Macedonia. What was the reason for that? They just came in for you, or?
They just came in for me. A guy called Peter Ollerton, who played in the national side up front. He wanted me as their centre half, and I felt if I was to get in the national team, because there was talks about me playing for the national side, I had to get out of Adelaide. So as much as Perth was, let's say, in the far east or backwards, to get in the national side, you had to be in Melbourne, you know, Sydney or Queensland.
Well, the international debut came 3 months later, so it was obviously a really good move. And you came off the bench in the World Cup qualifier against New Zealand. Do you remember that game vividly, or?
It was just. I remember warming up. Frank Harrock asked me to warm up, and honestly, I thought I'd been warming up for about 6 days. And when I went on, the nerves, like to play. State League is great, NPL is great, and then you go into your state team's fantastic, and then you go into the national side. It just keeps getting this level that goes higher and higher, and your body just wants to explode. But I loved every minute of it, but it was tough. It was tough. Every game's tough.
You moved back to Adelaide after a couple of seasons with Preston Macedonia. Was that again because West Adelaide was struggling a little bit then? Were you brought back to try and strengthen them?
Yeah, myself and Charlie Yankos, probably in hindsight wasn't a good move. They had all the best intentions, signed us and told us they were signing all these other players. And all they really did was sign 2 centre-halves. So it was never going to work out. And like I said, in hindsight, it was a bad move. And after that, I went back to Melbourne.
Yeah, they were relegated and you went to Melbourne, Croatia then, became the Melbourne Knights. And it seemed like you had a really happy time there, 167 games, 23 goals as well.
Yeah, scored a lot of goals. I mean, even at Preston at centre-half, I don't know if people know this, but I ended up top goal scorer, even though they signed Gary Cole at that time, who was the league's prolific goal scorer. But was top goal scorer there, but I always had a knack of scoring my 5, 6, 7, 8 goals a year from centre half.
And then in 1989 you came back to Perth. Was that you decided that the time was ripe to come back and you signed for Perth Italia?
Look, it was a conflicting one for me. I personally didn't really want to come back, but my wife also was from Perth, and she's very family orientated, as I am, and I thought the time was right for her. I mean, if you think about it, I was only 28 and still playing for the national side, so for me to leave, I think everybody was shocked. And there was things in the wings of me moving overseas as well, and to be honest, I was going to go to Queen's Park Rangers, who were I think in the first division then, and tore my medial ligament, so that stopped that. So came back to Perth, but was always expecting to go somewhere else after it, which I did.
Now, did it make up, man, when you played your only game for the state against Millwall?
I loved that game. I thought we did really well against Millwall. I mean, old Roscoe Greer, you won't mind me saying, Mr. Sitter. Teddy Sheringham scored their only goal. It was a great night. I mean, at the Velodrome it was packed. It was good old days, and I loved every minute of it. It was fantastic playing for the state. I wish I'd played more, but c'est la vie.
You know, you were never really here because, as you mentioned, you did then go overseas. You went and played in Hong Kong and Malaysia.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you find those? Were the leagues good in those days? I certainly know the Malaysia League was better than it probably is today.
Oh yeah. I mean, the rule was then the foreigners had to be internationals. So I played with 2 Czech players that played in the World Cup, and so there was myself and then Tim Bradbury, who was an Englishman. So we had the beauty of sort of having 4 foreigners, because Tim was, you know, a local. But anyway, the league, we were playing in front of 40, 50,000 people. You know, it was fantastic at the Shah Alam Stadium, and we won the cup and lost in the final to another couple of Aussie boys in who was it, Alistair Edwards and Craig Foster. They beat us in the final, so it was a great time there. Hong Kong was good. I played for the Hong Kong national side against China and Czechoslovakia against Big Skaravi, probably the biggest guy I've ever played against in my life, Man Mountain. But good times and yeah, definitely good leagues, definitely.
You played 25A internationals again, and you were an absentee for the Olympic Games qualification campaign because of a knee injury, but then you were recalled for the 4-Nation Bicentennial Cup against strong performances against Brazil twice, Saudi Arabia and Argentina. Was that where you thought, I've got to really perform if I want to play in the World Cup qualifiers?
Yeah, I think I was sort of given a little bit of an ultimatum by the then Eddie Thompson, saying, you know, Robbie, you got to show us if you've got it or not here. You know, we like you. A little bit unsure. I said, yeah, fair enough. You know, I thought I'd done well, you know, up to that point, but you know, I think that was a good tournament for me, and we just beat Argentina, who just won the World Cup 10 months earlier, and beat them 4-1, and they absolutely shell-shocked everybody. And no, I thought it was a good tournament, yeah, and it got me into the Olympics.
Yeah, and you were picked for the Olympics in Seoul, which we've got to touch on the fact that that was the last Olympic Games where there were no age limits, so the standard was really, really good.
Yeah, and also it was only 16 teams got to the final, not 32. So, you know, our team then was sort of like, in the history of Australian football, I don't know where it's going to end up, but I think we excelled and outdid ourselves really for part-timers. And, you know, we played Yugoslavia, who, you know, touted as the best team in Europe at the time, and we beat them 1-0. Even Charlie missed his one and only penalty. Could have been 2-0. I mean, we lost to Brazil and we lost to CCCP. So we're talking full teams of guys like Mikhailchenkov, all these type of players, and we lost to them, and both of them won the gold and silver. So we did really well, and we progressed out of our group. We even beat Nigeria, who were the reigning African champions. So we did very well.
You touched on the game there against Yugoslavia. Frank Arok obviously really wanted to beat them, and you were saying after the game they wouldn't swap shirts. Is that true?
Wouldn't swap shirts. Terrible furor went on, and we all lived in the Olympic Village, and we went back to the Olympic Village, and the Yugoslav team were all, not the players, but the actual group of athletes, were all crying. You know, that's how much it meant to them. You know, and it was sort of like they had to go play Brazil, and you know, if they didn't win that, they weren't going through. And sure enough, Brazil beat them, and we went through, and it just sent shockwaves around the place. And yeah, unfortunately, after the game, they were pretty bad sports.
You played against Brazil, and you would have been at the heart of the defence, and a certain player called Romario got a hat-trick in that game in the 3-0 victory. Yeah. I've read somewhere that you said he was your hardest opponent. Is that true?
Well, he was the hardest opponent in the sense of he did nothing during the game. He did nothing during the game. I mean, the Brazilian players would argue with him because he did nothing. he was so laid back, you know, like so relaxed. He's like Rob Zabika, you know, just so laid back. But then if the ball got in the box, he would get away from me, like for a yard, and that's all he needed. And he got sold after that for a world record $7 million, I think, at the time. And I caught up with him in a bar afterwards, and I told him he owed me part of that fee, actually, which I never got.
Did you get his shirt though?
Yeah, I got his shirt. It's a little bit small, a little bit too small, but yeah, I got his shirt.
I mean, you mentioned as well Russia. That was a fairly heated game in the quarterfinals, but again they had some great players like Mihailichenko. Yeah. And again, the performance of Australia in that match is, I think, often underplayed. Yeah,
I think so too. They got two very dubious penalties. I mean, if we had the VAR today, I can put my hand on heart and tell you one of them was about 1.5 meters outside the box. But it was a Korean referee, Russian game, and we all knew the politics with Korea and Russia then. Look, they were always going to beat us, but I think the scoreline flattered them because even after the game, they couldn't believe how much we matched them in most positions all over the park.
Now, I touched on the World Cup campaign as well in '86. Yeah. You were involved in that, and there was a lot of controversy when it came up against Australia, against Scotland, for a place at the Mexico World Cup finals. And you'd had a good result in Scotland, and then of course Frank Arup wanted to play the game in Darwin.
Yeah, he did, and within his rights. I mean, we're Australia, we can play anywhere we want. And he's a smart guy. He wanted to play it in Darwin. He wanted to play at bloody 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Soccer Australia, whatever they're called then, said no. They were thinking about the money, you know, all the rest of it. Wanted to play in Melbourne, and they even gave in to Scotland and playing at night time for the, you know, cool down a bit. And we should have won that game. I mean, I think Jim Leighton, the goalkeeper, was touted as his best game he ever played for Scotland. So that's how much he kept him in the game. It was a pity because, you know, like today, the Socceroos go through, you get a 4-year program. You know, every game where you're playing and whatever. We had our program, win the Oceania group, which you had to do, beat Israel, which we did. We all knew about that. And then we were on a plane on the way home, and apparently FIFA in the last minute said, no, you've got to go play Scotland. Totally out of the blue. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, FIFA cheated us, robbed us, and we should have gone to the World Cup in '86, not Scotland. And we would have done better than them as well.
Does that still really rankle with you?
You know, it does. As I get older, I just feel more and more I get cheated. In those days, you just take it because you're a professional, you do what you got to do. And the more I thought about it, and I read some horrible books on who stole my game, who stole the game, and all this sort of thing, and I just thought, this is one part of it that no one talks about. The Socceroos should have gone to the World Cup in '86. Plain and simple, that was the rules. And when they did that to us, I mean, you've got to remember their team as well, Scotland. Soonest, Dalglish, you know, all those players. And we did really well. Unfortunately, we lost the game 2-0 at Hampden in the last 10 minutes. But it was funny. Remember, I had a guy called Frank McAvenny, and I was on the plane on the way back, and Frank Arup called me up to where the toilets are, and he was standing and said, listen, son, you're playing against Frank McAvenny. You're starting next week. He's scored 21 goals in 21 games for West Ham, and he just scored yesterday his first game for Scotland. So 22 goals, 22 games. Your job, don't let him score. So I remember playing, and I think about 20 minutes to go, he never touched the ball, and Frank took me off. And I said to him, you told me not to let him score. I said, if he scores in this last 20 minutes, I'll never forgive you. Had a bit of a word with him on the way off. But no, that was probably my best night. I loved that night. It was fantastic.
Obviously, when you retired from international football, you came back and played in the State League again here, and then ventured into coaching. Did you have ambitions to progress as a coach?
Nah, not at all. I've never ever applied for a coaching job ever, even with the state team. All the jobs I've done, people have asked me to do it, and I've done it out of trying to give back. I mean, if I was ever paid by a club for coaching, I always gave it to the players. It was never about the money. Even Perth Glory going and helping there with Ronnie Smith, who I adored, you know, I went and helped him. Just if I was asked, I did it, and I did it out of the love for football and wanting to give back. But it was never in my mind that I wanted to be a coach. Even though I was asked many, many times and was offered good, even like Graham Arnold, now the national coach, even good assistant type jobs over East. But I was back in Perth, started a family, and I was here.
You mentioned obviously going back to coach with the Glory. I mean, how different did you find the A-League to the NSL that you remembered?
You know, the biggest thing that was different, Ashley, is the fact of how much the players' managers are involved and how much it affects the players. You know, a player wouldn't be playing, or you play him out of position and you get a call. Who's this? It's the manager. He's got to play, because if he doesn't play, 3 more games, his next contract doesn't kick in and all that. And I'm going, well, that, you know, it's not my problem. Or if you sit down and have meals, you know, they're sitting with their managers. We used to all sit together and muck around. And so the biggest thing was just the players' attitude had changed. The game had changed, and I think for the better. Technically and tactically, better players were allowed to do their thing on the pitch, which they weren't always allowed to do in the old days. So all that was great. But I don't know, did they become softer or whatever? I just don't know. I mean, Argentina, I got my leg ripped open by Batista and 30 odd stitches, and I went back on the park. Today, what would they do? Maybe a year out? I'm only kidding. But no, it opened my eyes up to how it has all changed, and it's changed a lot.
You mentioned at the beginning, obviously, you missed out on that opportunity to sign for St Mirren, but it sounds like you've still had a really good time in football. Yeah. And do you look back on it with real passion and enjoyment?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I love football. I love talking to guys. I mean, I'm heavily involved with my family in that now, and I'd like to get back in again. But yeah, when I watch the games, and even coming here actually to talk to you guys, and I pulled out the old jerseys and all that, and I just thought, God, they don't mean that much to you then. But looking back now, they're just the flood of memories it brings in. And I know I text Graham Arnold regularly, Ange at Celtic, he's doing a fantastic job. You know, all these other players, and I love watching guys I know do well. So I just stay involved that way.
Well, Robbie, thanks very much for sharing those memories.
No, thank you, Ashley, terrific. Thanks a lot.